Well, hello YouTube, this is Chuck. It's Saturday, July 8th. I'm still working on the old van. And just in case you've never seen one of these with the doghouse cover removed, this is kind of what it looks like. And I found my exhaust leak. I'll show you what it is. But in order to get to this, the first thing you got to do is remove the passenger seat, which is just these 4 bolts right here. 4 nuts actually. And just leave the base here. And then you can remove the doghouse itself, which is sitting right here. You notice the insulation under here. Well, that's because this engine tucked in there that tight puts out a lot of heat. But show you what my problem was, and then I'll tell you a couple things about this motor. See right there? That bolt was missing, and that bolt was missing. And what happens is that as that manifold heats up, it springs out a little bit and starts squirting a little bit of exhaust right out from around that port there. So I'm having a little difficulty getting the bolts to go back in, and I have bolts for it. But let me tell you what the issue is with these things. Is on this particular motor, and this is the Windsor Series Ford, these exhaust manifolds, they have a tendency to leak and crack. And the reason for that is over a period of time, when they go through a lot of warm up and cool down and get hot and cool down cycles, over a period of time, they'll warp and they'll shrink just a little bit. And eventually what happens is they get to the point where they shrink up and they'll actually shear the bolts off, or they'll crack. They're very prone to cracking. Now remember, this vehicle's 32 years old, and when I had the heads off of it a few years ago when I was working on it, and I put it all back together again, I could not get that bolt to go in there. And so I ended up figuring that this one here would be enough, because there's a lot of material there. I figured this wouldn't be enough to hold it. And so I put it back together, and I knew I could get to it fairly easy. So I put it back together without that bolt. And when I started getting that exhaust leak, I kind of figured it had something to do with that. Well, we get it apart, found out that this bolt here, for whatever reason, was missing. Now, the holes there, I can put a probe in there. Now, there's how deep, right there is how deep the manifold itself is. But if I put that probe back up, all the way up in there, okay, I've got, the hole is there. I'm having trouble getting a bolt to go back in there to line back up. Now, the proper way to fix this would be just go ahead and order another manifold. They're readily available through Rock Auto. But right now I'm trying to do it the cheap way. The manifold's about $50 and take about a week to get here. And so I don't want to mess with it any more than I have to. Now, some of you that are mechanics that are pretty sharp-eyed are also going to notice that there's an oil leak right here from the back of this manifold right there, or back of this valve cover right there. You can see how shiny black it is? That's from an oil leak. What that is, I've got enough blow-by in this poor old engine that it pressurizes the crankcase and it tends to push the oil out through the gaskets. There's nothing wrong with it except it's just old and a little bit too much blow-by. And that's why it's got that. Now, they come with that positive crankcase ventilation valve right there to try to combat that. But this one's just a little bit beyond that point. Now, while I got this off of here, let's see if I can point out a couple other things for you. Whenever you need to pull these things apart every once in a while, and there's a couple things you need to check. And one of the things you need to check, of course, is for fuel leaks. And I've got a gasoline odor, and I thought I knew what it was, and I still think I know what it is. But I needed to check, and there's a couple things here I wanted to make sure that it wasn't. Okay, now I got to get jockeyed around here to show you. But a couple things here. This is the quick connect from the fuel pump from the fuel tank. Okay, so you want to make sure that that's not leaking. This is the return line that goes back, and this is the pressure regulator. This is the return line that goes back to the tank. So you want to make sure that one's not leaking. And then there's another one here, which is this little line right there. It's maybe kind of hard to see. I'm trying to lean over here. But that little line right there, and that goes from the fuel rail on the driver's side back over here to the fuel rail on the passenger side. And right there, I can move it back and forth. You can see it a little bit. Well, when they come from the factory with a little pressed-on plastic line. with a rubber cover over it. And being plastic, over a period of time, they'll get brittle, and eventually they'll break, they'll split. And the little rubber cover on there is not strong enough to hold the fuel in, so it blows up like a balloon. And then all of a sudden, when it breaks, it dumps gasoline all over the back of your engine down here. Well, of course, tucked back in this doghouse, if that catches fire, which it very probably will, there's not much chance of putting it out. It's going to burn your van up. Now, if it's in the motor like this in a pickup or a car, then at least when you open the hood, you can shoot back in there with a fire extinguisher. Of course, turn the motor off, and that'll shut the fuel pump down. But so you have a slight chance of saving it. But on these vans, you need to pull this cover off every so often and check those things, because those are problematic. Another thing on this particular engine is it has a two-piece intake manifold. Now, this part here is called the plenum, and it bolts to the manifold itself right back in here. Well, there's only 6 bolts on that thing, and they're spaced quite a ways apart, and they're prone to leakage. And so when you work on them, you can't even take this valve cover off without taking this thing off, and it's kind of a pain in the butt to get to, and especially on this thing. But you got to remove that, and you got to be real careful when you put it back on, and because otherwise they'll leak and you'll end up taking it back apart again. So just a few little things on this particular motor in the van, and I'm still not quite sure how I'm going to deal with that exhaust manifold thing. I might end up having to order another manifold to replace it, which is, like I say, that's the real way to fix it. But right now I'm trying to figure out a way to shade tree it and make it work, and I'll let you know how it comes out. But these things, they're very prone to exhaust leaks. When they put them together at the factory, they don't even use a gasket in there between the manifold and the head. And so, of course, when these things start warping. But like I say, when I pulled it apart, that bolt was missing. This next bolt was loose. This bolt was loose. And it allowed this, when it started getting hot, it allowed it to flex out this way just enough to give me a little exhaust leak right around here. And what it is, a little thing that's going tick, 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 when it's running, and as it warms up, it gets worse. And so that's my exhaust leak I'm chasing. I'll figure out a way to fix it one way or another. So for right now, I guess I'll let you go. It's been coming up on 8 minutes now talking about all this little stuff. And so I'll let you go for now. And as I always tell you, take care of each other, love each other. I'm still working on the old van. I'll get her whipped one of these days. But fortunately, don't have to make my living as a mechanic, so I don't have a customer breathing down my neck and complaining about how expensive things got. And I can take my time. And I'm already, it's already coming up on 11 o'clock. I'm already starting to run out of shadow here. And so once it gets in the sun, it gets kind of hot here. So I probably won't go too much further today. I'll just close it up and come back and start working on it again in the morning and see if I can figure out how to whoop this. But I'll figure it out eventually. So until I talk to you again, I'll just say, once again, have a great day and peace out.